The mahogany dining room table had never felt so cold beneath my palms. For weeks had passed since we buried Grandma Eleanor, and here we were, gathered like vultures around the very table where she used to serve her famous Sunday pot roast. The irony wasn't lost on me that this same table would now become the battleground for her legacy. Mom sat at the head of the table, her perfectly manicured fingers drumming against a manila envelope that seemed to glow with importance. My sister Jessica lounged in her chair like she already owned the place, her designer handbag casually thrown over Grandma's antique chair. Meanwhile, I sat rigid, my hands clasped so tightly my knuckles had turned white. "Well," Mom began, her voice carrying that familiar tone she used when she was about to deliver news she thought would upset me, "I've been handling Eleanor's affairs, and it's time we discussed her will." Jessica's eyes lit up like Christmas morning. She'd been Grandma's supposed favorite for as long as I could remember, or at least that's what everyone believed. While I spent my weekends helping Grandma with her garden, listening to her stories about the Great Depression, and learning her secret recipes, Jessica would breeze in for holidays, flash her perfect smile, and somehow steal the spotlight. "Before we begin," Mom continued, sliding the envelope toward Jessica, "I want you both to know that your grandmother thought very carefully about this decision. She wanted what was best for the family." My heart sank. I'd seen this performance before. Mom's way of softening the blow, while simultaneously justifying whatever favoritism was about to unfold. Growing up, it was always Jessica who got the bigger bedroom, the newer car, the college fund that never seemed to run dry. I'd learned to expect disappointment, but somehow I'd hoped Grandma would be different. "Jessica," Mom announced, her voice filled with pride, "your grandmother has left you the house, all her jewelry, her savings account, and the contents of her safety deposit box. She felt that, as the eldest, you'd be the most responsible steward of her legacy." The words hit me like a physical blow. The house? The place where I'd spent countless summers learning to cook, where Grandma taught me to play piano, where she'd held me when my first boyfriend broke my heart. Jessica had barely visited in the last 5 years, too busy with her corporate job and social climbing to spare time for an old lady. Jessica tried to look appropriately solemn, but I could see the gleam of triumph in her eyes. "I'm honored. Grandma would have wanted me to take care of everything," she said, her voice dripping with false humility. "What about Emma?" she added, glancing at me with what I suppose was meant to be sympathy. "Surely Grandma left her something?" Mom's pause lasted a heartbeat too long. "Well, there are a few personal items, some books, her recipe collection, and—" She hesitated, her old sewing machine. A sewing machine. After 32 years of being Grandma's shadow, of being the granddaughter who actually cared, who visited twice a week, who held her hand through her final illness, I got a sewing machine and some recipes. That's it. I managed to whisper, my voice barely audible. "Emma, sweetheart," Mom said, reaching across to pat my hand with the same condescending gesture she'd used my entire life. "You have to understand. Jessica has the MBA, the stable career, the house in the suburbs. She's better equipped to handle this kind of responsibility. Your grandmother knew that. Better equipped." The phrase echoed in my mind like a slap. Better equipped because she'd chosen profit over people? Better equipped because she'd inherited Dad's business sense while I'd chosen to become a teacher? Better equipped because she'd never spent sleepless nights caring for our dying grandmother? Jessica was already making plans. "I'll need to get the house appraised," she mused, pulling out her phone. "The real estate market is hot right now. I could probably get twice what it's worth if I sell quickly." Sell. She wanted to sell Grandma's house. The house that had been in our family for 3 generations. The house where 4 generations of women had learned to become themselves within its walls. "You can't be serious," I said, finding my voice for the first time since this nightmare began. "Emma, be realistic," Jessica replied, not even looking up from her phone. "I live across the country. I can't maintain a property here. Besides, the inheritance taxes alone will be substantial. Selling is the smart move. Smart. Everything was always about being smart with Jessica. Never about being right or kind or honoring someone's memory. Just smart. But Grandma loved that house, I protested, feeling tears threaten to spill over. She always said it would stay in the family. She told me stories about every room, every piece of furniture. She made me promise. Promise what? Mom interrupted, her eyebrows raised in skepticism. I stopped myself. The promise I'd made to Grandma during her final days was private, sacred. She'd made me swear to protect the family's history, to keep the house safe, to remember the stories she'd shared. But how could I explain that when apparently her official will said otherwise? Nothing, I muttered, defeated. It doesn't matter now. Jessica finally looked up from her phone, and for a moment I saw a flicker of something. Guilt? Remorse? Cross her features, but it vanished as quickly as it appeared. Look, Emma, I know this is hard, but Grandma was practical above all else. She knew I could handle the financial complexities of her estate. Maybe. She paused, as if considering a great generosity. Maybe when I sell the house, I could give you a small percentage. As a gesture. A gesture. My entire relationship with Grandma reduced to a gesture from my sister's largesse. But as I sat there, absorbing the magnitude of what felt like the ultimate betrayal, my fingers unconsciously traced the edge of the document hidden in my jacket pocket. The document I'd been carrying for 3 weeks, waiting for this moment. The document that would change everything. I looked around the table at my family, my mother, so certain of her decision, my sister, already calculating her windfall, and I realized they had no idea what was coming. Is that everything? I asked quietly. Mom nodded, relief evident on her face. I know it's a lot to process, Emma, but this is what your grandmother wanted. I stood up slowly, my hand still touching the document. Actually, I said, my voice steadier than it had been all afternoon, I don't think we're quite finished here. And with that, I pulled out the papers that would turn their world upside down. The silence that followed was deafening. I placed the document on the table with deliberate care, making sure it landed directly in front of Mom. The thick, cream-colored paper seemed to glow under the dining room chandelier. The same chandelier Grandma had bought at an estate sale in 1967. What's this? Mom asked, but her voice had changed. The confident authority she'd wielded moments earlier was already beginning to crack. Jessica leaned forward, squinting at the papers. Emma, if this is some kind of contest to the will. It's not a contest, I interrupted, my voice surprisingly calm. It's the real will. The color drained from Mom's face as she picked up the document. Her eyes scanned the first page, then darted back to the top, reading it again as if the words might change. This can't be right, she stammered. What does it say? Jessica demanded, reaching for the papers. Mom's hand trembled as she read aloud. Last Will and Testament of Eleanor Margaret Davidson, dated March 15th, 2024. Being of sound mind and body, I hereby revoke all previous wills and codicils. March 15th, 3 months before Grandma's death. 2 months after the will Mom had just read to us. I don't understand, Jessica said, her voice rising with panic. Where did you get this? I took a deep breath, remembering the day Grandma had pressed these papers into my hands. We'd been sitting in her garden, the spring sun warming our faces as she tended to her beloved roses. She'd seemed so frail that day, but her eyes had been sharp and determined. Grandma gave it to me herself, I said, the day after she came back from her lawyer's office. She made me promise to keep it safe until after she was gone. That's impossible, Mom sputtered. I would have known. I was handling all of her affairs. I had her power of attorney. For her medical decisions, I corrected, not for her legal affairs. She specifically chose a different lawyer, one you didn't know about. She wanted to make sure this remained private until the right moment. Jessica was reading over Mom's shoulder now, her face growing paler with each line. This says, she left me $1,000. And a piece of her jewelry, I added helpfully. The pearl earrings, I believe. But the house goes to me, I finished, along with all contents, her savings, her investments, and yes, the safety deposit box. The room fell silent except for the ticking of Grandma's grandfather clock in the corner. I watched as the reality of the situation sank in. All of Jessica's plans, all of her calculations about quick sales and market values, evaporating like morning dew. This has to be a fake, Jessica said finally, desperation creeping into her voice. You probably had this made up. Emma, you can't seriously think. It's notarized, I pointed out, flipping to the last page. By Edmund Hartley, attorney at law. His office is downtown. You can call him if you'd like to verify its authenticity. Mom was still staring at the document as if it might burst into flames, but Eleanor never said anything to me. We talked about her just last month. She seemed satisfied with the arrangements we'd made. The arrangements you'd made, I corrected gently. Grandma told me you'd been pressuring her for months to leave everything to Jessica. You kept talking about responsibility and practicality, about how I wasn't financially stable enough to handle an inheritance. The accusation hung in the air like smoke. Mom's mouth opened and closed without sound, caught between denial and guilt. So she played along, I continued. She let you think you'd convinced her, let you draw up that other will, even signed it. But then she went to her own lawyer and made sure her real wishes were documented. Why? Jessica asked, and for the first time, she sounded genuinely hurt rather than angry. Why would she do this to us? I looked at my sister, really looked at her, and saw not the successful businesswoman or the golden child, but the little girl who'd once cried when she thought Grandma loved me more. Despite everything, my heart ached for her. It wasn't about punishment, I said softly. It was about understanding. Grandma knew that you saw her house as an asset to be liquidated. She knew you saw her belongings as items to be appraised and sold. But to me, I paused, thinking of all those afternoons spent listening to her stories, learning about our family's history, understanding that every object in that house was a memory, a connection to the past. To me, they're priceless in a way that has nothing to do with money. Jessica's eyes filled with tears. But I loved her too. Maybe I didn't visit as much. Maybe I was busy with my career, but I did love her. I know, I said, and I meant it. She knew that too. But love and understanding are different things. You loved the grandmother who spoiled you at Christmas. I loved the woman who taught me that the Depression-era glass in her china cabinet wasn't valuable because it was expensive. It was valuable because it represented her mother's determination to create beauty even when there was barely enough money for food. Mom finally found her voice. Emma, I hope you understand that I was only trying to do what I thought was best for everyone. Jessica has more experience with financial planning. And I have more experience with Grandma, I interrupted. I know which floorboard creaks in the hallway. I know that the leak in the basement comes from the original plumbing that Grandpa installed himself. I know that the rose garden needs to be pruned in February, not March, despite what all the gardening books say. I looked around the room, at the family portraits lining the walls, at the built-in bookshelf where Grandma kept her collection of first editions, at the piano where she'd taught me to play for Elise with infinite patience. I know this house, I said simply, and more importantly, this house knows me. The weight of the document between us seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment. Everything had changed and we all knew it, but the biggest revelation was still to come. Jessica stood up abruptly, her chair scraping against the hardwood floor with a sound that made us all wince. She walked to the window, staring out at Grandma's garden where the late roses were still blooming despite the October chill. I need some air, she said, but she didn't move toward the door. Instead, She pressed her forehead against the glass. 34 years old, and I still feel like I'm competing for approval. Her vulnerability caught me off guard. This wasn't the polished executive I was used to seeing, the one who always had the right answer and the perfect plan. Jess, I began, but she held up a hand. No, let me finish. You want to know the truth? I knew. She turned around, and her eyes were red-rimmed but determined. I knew she was going to change her will. Mom gasped. What do you mean you knew? The last time I visited, 3 months ago, Grandma pulled me aside. She asked me what I would do with the house if I inherited it. So I told her, honestly, that I'd probably sell it. I told her about the market analysis I'd already run, about how much equity was tied up in this old place. Jessica's laugh was bitter. I thought I was being practical. I thought she'd be impressed with my business acumen. Instead, she just nodded and said, I see. She walked back to the table but didn't sit down. 2 days later, she called and asked me point blank if I thought Emma would be a good steward for the family history. I said yes because it's true. You were always her favorite, Emma. But not because she loved you more. Because you understood her better. The admission hung between us like a bridge neither of us was sure we wanted to cross. So when I got Mom's call about the will reading, Jessica continued, I suspected something was off. Grandma was too smart, too careful, to leave her life's work to someone who'd just turn it into a real estate transaction. Mom looked stricken. But you didn't say anything. You let me. I let you what, Mom? Orchestrate another performance where Emma gets the leftovers. Jessica's voice was sharp now. Do you know how exhausting it is being the golden child? Do you know how it feels to know that every achievement is measured against your sister's failures, and every failure is ignored because you're supposed to be perfect? I stared at my sister, seeing her clearly for perhaps the first time in years. I never knew you felt that way. Of course you didn't, because I played my part perfectly. She sat back down, suddenly looking exhausted. The successful one, the responsible one, the one who made all the right choices. But the truth is, Emma, I've envied you your entire life. Envied me? I couldn't hide my disbelief. You have everything, the career, the money, the apartment in Manhattan. I have things, she corrected. You have connections. You have people who genuinely love you, not what you can provide for them. You have authentic relationships built on something more substantial than networking opportunities. She gestured around the room. Look at this place. Every surface tells a story that you know by heart. You can walk into any room and remember not just what happened there, but how it felt. That's not inheritance, Emma. That's belonging. The words hit deeper than I expected. I thought about all the years I'd spent feeling like the lesser daughter, the one who couldn't quite measure up to Jessica's achievements. I'd never considered that she might be carrying her own burden of expectations. There's something else, I said quietly. I hadn't planned to share this, but Jessica's honesty deserved reciprocal truth. The safety deposit box, Grandma told me what's in it. Both Mom and Jessica leaned forward. Letters, I said. Dozens of them. Love letters from Grandpa, but also letters from her sister Rose, and from her best friend Catherine, and from her mother. A whole correspondence that spans decades of her life. I pulled out a small key from my pocket, the key Grandma had pressed into my hand along with the will. She wanted someone to read them, to understand the woman. She was beyond just being our grandmother. She wanted the stories to continue. That's why she chose you, Jessica said, and there was no bitterness in her voice now, just understanding. You're the family historian. You're the one who'll actually read them, who'll preserve them. Mom was crying now, quiet tears that she didn't bother to wipe away. I've made such a mess of this, of everything. I thought I was protecting both of you, but I was just perpetuating all the same mistakes my mother made with me and Rose. Aunt Rose, I asked. Grandma's sister had died when I was young, and she was rarely mentioned. Your grandmother wasn't the favorite either, Mom admitted. Rose got the attention, the praise, the opportunities. Eleanor got the responsibility and the expectation to be grateful for whatever was left over. When Rose died suddenly, Eleanor inherited everything by default, and she swore she'd never put her own children through that kind of comparison. But you did it anyway, Jessica observed. With us. Mom nodded miserably. I thought I was being fair, giving each of you what suited your strengths. I never realized I was just creating a different kind of competition. The three of us sat in silence, the weight of 3 generations of family dysfunction settling around us like dust. But for the first time in my adult life, I felt like we were actually seeing each other clearly. So what happens now? Jessica asked finally. I looked at the will, at the key, at my family sitting around Grandma's table. Now I read the letters. I learn the stories. I take care of the house. I paused, meeting Jessica's eyes. And maybe, if you want, you could help me. Not with the business side, but with understanding who we come from. Jessica smiled, the first genuine smile I'd seen from her all day. I'd like that. And maybe, I added, looking at Mom, we could all learn to stop competing and start connecting. Outside, Grandma's roses continued blooming, oblivious to our human dramas, beautiful in their certainty that some things endure beyond any single season. Some inheritances, I realized, couldn't be divided or sold or fought over. Some gifts only grew more valuable when they were shared.